Welcome, everybody, back to Veil of Sound. It's one of the last Sundays of February, and I'm very, very happy to have, I would say an institution, a legend in his own right here on the show. I'm very happy to have Jason Köhnen here on the show. So, Jason, thanks for joining.
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Yeah, it is our pleasure as well. And for everybody who now says, Köhnen, I've heard the name. Yes, you have. The guy is, first of all, as his moniker here says, one of the people behind The Answer Lies in the Black Void. He's also one of the members of Celestial Season. He is in the Kilimanjaro and Mount Fuji corporations and ensembles. And right now, he has released again, after a little while, a record under his famous moniker, Bong-Ra. So, Jason, first of all, do you ever sleep?
No, not really. When it comes to writing music, sleep when I'm dead.
So how much time do you spend writing a week?
Oh, sorry, you glitched there. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. How much time do you spend writing a week?
It's not really on a structured, regular basis. It's more in periods, depending on the planning we have with the projects. So, and then it's quite intense. I must say that over the years or over the decades, you've managed to find a way. That I can structure the time I have, and it's quite intense, into getting the work done and composed as I want. I think with the experience of releasing a lot of varied music and a lot of albums, that basically I can prepare an album in my head already. So if I go for a long walk, and then I can already flesh out songs or concepts, artworks, and knowing myself and how I compose music and which steps to take, then actually it saves a lot of time by already having like this prepared pre-work done.
But again, I mean, like, that sounds very clear and very easy. But again, you have so many projects. How difficult is it to coordinate all of those?
It's quite natural, because I've not known anything different for the last 20 years.
Okay.
It gradually, the project started to expand, in the beginning or mid 90s, where, it gradually went from 2-3 projects to sometimes juggling like 6, 7 or 8 projects. Now at this time, it's gone back to like 5 or 6. So
sorry for laughing, but it's just interesting when somebody says, 5 or 6.
And but yeah, now the fact that I am getting older, it's and more experience, they are planned out very well during a year. It wasn't my intention to, I wanted to stick to like 2, maximum 3 projects. But yeah, also just now recently with the reunion of the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble, it's something unexpected, after a 12-year split up. So yeah, that's something we couldn't say no to into reforming the group. But yeah, it just takes planning. Like, let's say if you have 4 or 5 kids, you need to schedule in how you spend the time with your kids. It's the same. I don't have children, so probably the projects are the children then. Yeah.
Well, there's probably a lot of truth to that, and the good thing is you don't have to change diapers. Something that, of course, is clear behind a lot of these projects, or in a lot of these projects, you are responsible for the rhythm, for the beat, for the drums. Was that something that was always your main interest? For example, when you were a teenager, like that part of music?
Not really. It evolved that way. So in a nutshell, my musical history and background started with in metal. I grew up listening firstly to, the regular speed thrash stuff, Metallica, Slayer, Maiden, Black Sabbath, gradually going into more underground stuff. One of my absolute favorite bands is Holy Terror. They did two albums, Terror and Submission and Mind Wars. And then the formation of when I was getting older and understanding music and starting playing music was the early grindcore, English punk, extreme noise terror, Discharge, Doom, early Napalm Death. So that's also when the weird rhythms came. The interest in beats then happened when in the mid 90s I switched from metal to electronics. When I heard jungle music for the first time, accidentally, I was still living at home at my mom's place, and BBC used to have Top of the Pops, and there was so just jungle music had taken the charts and became popular in the UK. And there was one jungle producer, M-Beat. They had a very famous classic jungle anthem called Incredible. And I heard these chopped beats for the first time, these polyrhythms. And, apart from that, it was a whole different timbre, a whole different sound, and this choppiness and these weird rhythms. I was just hooked, and I closed the door to metal pretty quickly for a brief moment until I started learning the tricks of the trade with programming drums. And then obviously, you cannot let go of once that metal virus has you. So started to combine the two of them together. And then like in the early 2000s, that's when I really started experimenting with metal and electronic breaks. My first big metal electronica release was in, I think it was 2006 or 2007, called the Grind Crusher EP, which was a tribute to the Grind Crusher tour you had then with Earache. I think it was Cathedral, Entombed, Carcass, and I don't know, Confessor or something. And then which were a lot of bolt thrower samples from the War Master album, which was approved by Bolt Thrower later. And I once met Joe Bench at a festival, and who got a lot of great feedback from people from the electronic world who discovered or heard Bolt Thrower due to the Grind Crusher album. And then so gradually then metal and electronics fusion continued, till 20 years later, I'm back now with the Black Noise album.
Yes, and that is an album which took a lot of people by surprise. I know that a lot of my friends had been talking, we would love to have a new Bong-Ra record. Hasn't happened for a longer period of time. And then the news broke, and I remember a lot of my friends automatically going into, let's say, head nod mode and listening to, for example, some of the singles that you've released or that you put out as a little teaser. When I listen to Black Noise, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have a feeling as if it's a tidbit more organical, a little less sampling based. Is that just my feeling, or is there really more organic stuff in there?
It is. It's correct. The two previous albums, Antediluvian and Meditations, were already taking the progression to more organic. Had a Balash Pandey on drums for those albums, and Colin Webster on saxophone. Those two albums of Bong-Ra, this more doom jazz themed albums, actually evolved into the Lovecraft Sextet project on Debemur Morti Productions. It's actually, partially thanks to DMP in having the confidence in releasing the Misere album of the Lovecraft Sextet, which actually brought me closer to the metal again. And especially being a fan of the label and being a big fan of Blue Thousand Nord and Aklis and Ulcerate as well to an extent, it rekindled the metal flame a bit more. And so having the Meditations and Antediluvian concept switch to the Lovecraft Sextet with more or less the same musicians, it gave me room again to reinvent Bong-Ra. And it was very clear that I wanted to lay more focus on metal and organic. Why? Because the Ancelize in the Black Void, as you mentioned, the doom metal band, which I have with my wife, Martina, singer of Dicatophague, also gave me the experience and pleasure again to rehearse and perform with people on stage. And our two guitarists, Attila and Botond, amazing guitarists. That was like a no-brainer to have them, join for live. I sent the demo tracks to Phil of DMP, who loved it and without question was willing to release it. So that was great because the way that they present their music, their products, and also their promotion, I knew that it had a reason. There's a good fusion there to bring this music on that label. And so, I think it turned out very well. Someone else mentioned, apart from the word then using that organic, that it had this kind of a strange retro future sound to it. So partly there was this nostalgic part with, all the industrial metal, be it old Pitch Shifter, Scorn, Godflesh, GGFH, but at the same time with, the whole glitch and the futurism electronica gave it this weird, unplaceable thing. It's like, okay, it sounds a bit retro, but it also sounds futuristic, which I found a wonderful way of describing the album. I think that really does nail it. Yeah. Sorry. To answer your question, so that organic thing, the point you made, absolutely, completely agree.
Would you agree that the best records are those which, I hate the term because everything is depending on its time and its historical environment, but would you agree that a lot of the best records or most of the best records have this kind of timeless feel to it?
Yeah, absolutely. They must. I don't want to sound like a old whiny cunt, but the music industry has really evolved to where the system has become mass consumption, and the nostalgic times where there was less music coming out or more difficult to find the music.
Yeah.
Made even less good albums timeless just because you were obliged to spend time and dig into them. And even mediocre albums turned out to be timeless. This is because you had to invest in them, and that's one thing which I really find a shame, is that this investment into music has unfortunately disappeared with the whole system being changed.
Before anybody out there says but no album becomes a classic if it's not really good, or if it's not really great in a way, I have two records for you that prove you wrong. Him, whichever Him record you put on, mediocre. Sorry, that's not doom, that's not pop, it's nothing. And I now know that a lot of the British folks will hate me, but Bush never had a really good record. But a lot of people say, oh, the Razor Blade Suitcase. Compare it to some of the real grunge records, and sorry. Just my opinion. But I know what you say, and it's also the way that I think the problem is the availability of music. On the other hand, we must also agree that, of course, your music is also just one click away on everybody's phone. But is it nowadays a necessity for a musician to be available 24/7?
And I think it's what's destroying, especially the mystery.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the younger generation, and I'm guilty of it as well to an extent. But we have become content creators / musicians, and it's a necessity because there's a huge battle for attention. There's only so much space that you can fill in people's brain or attention to get. I think it's working to the contrary of the magic and mystery of the music. There were years that I had no idea how a band would look like or who they were, and it would only feed my imagination. For example, Holy Terror, if you get those 2 albums, they're still a very unknown band. Their artwork, their lyrics, okay, there are pictures of them and they look cool. They look, your typical mid-80s Bay Area thrashers. But there's maybe 1 or 2 live shows on them of old VHS on YouTube. So this, for me, is still a great mystery behind Holy Terror, even if I've dug into, as much as I could find. But that for me was magical. I mean, even I remember having, Iron Maiden, Power Slave, and, just looking at that artwork, with Eddie there as the Pharaoh. I don't know. It's still possible, but I think it's very hard for young people to experience that, the way as it was experienced back then. Does that mean, does it mean that they find another way of experiencing the music, better or worse? I don't know. I've never had, unfortunately, conversation with a Gen Zer about how they, experience the music in contrast to how our generation did. I'm very curious to see where the similarities or the differences lie. But overall, the things that I hear, the feedback is that, with streaming, with content creation, with social media, that it's not for the better.
Well, being a father, I can tell you one thing: the album will be dying. They don't consume albums most of the time. But I think the appreciation for music will never vanish. It's just they consume it differently. And yes, I agree. Something that a lot of them don't share is this excitement. You've spoken about, not knowing a band. I think for you, it's probably very hard. But can you understand why some bands nowadays go the path of, okay, we try to be anonymous? For example, Bluetooth Nord.
Yeah, I do, and I respect it a lot. And I can imagine it's a very tough decision to make because you are limiting yourself with a lot of opportunities. I see, for example, what Bluetooth Nord does. This choice of remaining out of the picture, or mysterious or incognito, a different way than, for example, I don't know, a band like Sleep Token, who then has their costumes on, or a band who does this, because that's, for me, that's marketing. That's they're still in the pictures. They're there, and
it's so, like Ghost.
Yeah, exactly. Marketing. It's marketing, and I really do value the balls that it takes for a band like Bluetooth Nord to take that path. I think probably I gather that the character of these musicians also has this a bit of this misanthropic or anti-societal, or how do you call it, Einzelganger kind of vibe to it, that they want to stay apart as well.
I can say from my experience with several musicians by now that some of them, and I think that is something that you would share, even though you're not an anonymous person. Some of them say, we want to remain anonymous, because then people will concentrate more on our music. Is that something that you can understand and that you maybe also share? People should focus on the music and less on Jason?
Yes, absolutely. Completely agree. That's why I personally choose to keep the, social media content, to a minimal. Like, for example, I now have an Instagram page, set up like 3 months ago because, with DMP, they said it would be handy to have your own channel. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. What I prefer to have is not, to keep that mystery. I would prefer if people who listen to my music would see the projects and be able to connect the dots between the projects, because there's one stream. They're connected. They might think, oh wow, Bong-Ra, and then with Darkjazz it's so different, or this. No, if you look at all the project, there is a very clear connection with everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that. When you started talking, I was just want to make that point. Of course, there is a personal connection, amongst all these projects. But, and that is something that I noticed when I was preparing for this interview and looking at your discography. There is somehow a certain fret going through it. And I've been trying to find a certain thematical or musical fret. The musical fret, that is, I think, the search for new patterns, for new rhythms, for new, also moods. But for example, if we look at, let's say, Antediluvian, and let's look at the Kilimanjaro records. I think there is a certain search for how sound influences rhythms. Is that so? Because I think a lot of the music that you make is very rhythm oriented. And then you look at, okay, how can I rephrase it? How can I make it into different shapes?
Yeah, definitely. I think like, there is never really a central point. It's like saying, in the universe, there is no center of the universe. Wherever point you are is the center. So with the music projects, no matter maybe not in the early parts when I'm still growing up and discovering myself, but to, let's say, maybe have 95 as a starting point, there's never a center, because from every part, it branches out into a specific direction from that starting point. And that could be from one period where it branches out into other projects, songs of projects where there is, as you say, experimentations and evolutions in rhythm. And then you can say from one point, let's say, Here Be Dragons of Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble, there are a couple of songs where you can hear where I start experimenting with Arabic scales, Middle Eastern music. That then branches out into the thing with Five Eyes project, that branches out into Mansour project, and then you get the Oud. So there are like there is a branch out in every project, or parts of songs, which then expand into where the universe just expands in itself, and you can there is no center point. It just depends where you want to start. So let's say if you would start in first time you listen to some of my music, and that would be The Anselize and the Black Void, then that would branch out, that you could say, oh, Bong-Ra has done some doom jazz stuff, but then you have some doom jazz stuff with the Lovecraft, but then it goes back to Celestial Season, where you have this very early death doom. So then and if you turn it the other way around, then you can see how it goes from old school traditional doom, branches out into like now post doom metal or a doom jazz. So that's kind of one part of a thread in the music. And the other one is that it's a life journal. If anyone wants to get to know me, just listen to or look at my catalog from the beginning, because there you will find my old girlfriends. You will find out when I'm heartbroken. You'll find out when there's a death in the family. One of my pets died. So that's all there, and it's an open book in the music, and you can hear it from there.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mention the Arabic scales, because that is also something that I find very interesting, that that you have a very, very open attitude towards music. I don't want to say something like everything goes, but you seem to be open to a lot of new influences. Could you pinpoint any particular influence on the new Bong-Ra album?
Well, this new one, the concept is, and it's a bit of the sign of the times, where it's the dystopian theme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just a bit of, let's say, the last 3, 4, 5 years, where, you know, there have been a lot of shifts when it comes to, you know, troubled, you know, global times. You know, we see, and from any angle you want to see it. So that's not usually something I focus on, but, you know, I've always been interested in literature. You know, we had the classics at school, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, 1984, or Brave New World. One of my favorite books and films is Cormac McCarthy's The Road. You know, the film with Viggo Mortensen, amazing. You know, old 70s, 80s.
Very
classic.
underrated. Very
Absolutely,
underrated.
yeah. You know, THX 1138. That's a George Lucas film, or Logan's Run. So these, you know, these.
Wasn't that one of the earlier Lucas films before he started?
Was with Robert Duvall, I think, plays the main role in there, and it's
I wouldn't be wrong.
A bit of an unknown classic as well. So, you know, this kind of this dystopia. You know, society and humanity gone to ruins. You know, the insects that take over. So very bleak, and it's absolutely not the regular position in life I have. That's actually, you should look more to antediluvian and especially meditations, because that's where that's really a key on my position in life regarding philosophy and spirituality. I'm evolved and turned into a practicing Stoic, and my practicing, let's say, form of spirituality is Hermeticism. So I take my my structure of life and my concept of belief and you know, the hereafter and whatever, in, you know, these two forms. There's been a bit of dabbling in Sufism or Buddhism. You know, you taste a little bit here or there, but, you know, in principality, it's Hermeticism, where, yeah, the teaching which I guide my life around in metaphysical form.
Is that also, when you say Hermeticism, is it also for you a literary or a literal thing, that you really go into an inner or real absence from the world, that you try to take your time off?
Well, the thing which I really like about Hermeticism is when it comes to like meditating or turning off. For me, that's music. You know, in that sense, if you want to take a religion, for me, a religion is music. That's where I can hypnotize myself, or, you know, go in a trance. You know, when I'm composing and I have a loop, and sometimes I can turn off. But with Hermeticism, is what I like is that it's very pragmatic. So its teachings is about about dualities and the understanding the balances of light and darkness, and, you know, love and hate, and that basically the duality is that, you know, on the scale of light or let me say differently, there is basically a light and dark doesn't exist. They're highs, they're gradations of one point. So it's like, for example, with love and hate, where does love start for you, and where is hate or hot and cold? So I like this concept of, that's one of the concept of there's 7 principles of Hermeticism, and this, the duality is a central point, and these. Basically it's like yin and yang as well, the light and the dark, and that functions very well for me also with the balance of composing and using music, because it's the juxtapositions of these extremes that always work. Why does something loud in music work? It's because you juxtapose it to the moment of stillness. So these shades and these use of these colors in music, I learned more and I understood more with the practicing and the teaching of Hermeticism, because it just made a lot clear that it's very universal, and it's probably, if anyone picks up a book about Hermeticism, like the Kabbalion, not the Kabbalah, the Kabbalion, then more than half would be, okay, but that's, I know this already, or I've interpreted it, I've come across in another way, but it brings it in a very precise way together.
When you speak about balancing, I mean, let's look at black noise again. Black noise is a wonderfully heavy, screechy. I try to avoid genre name breakcore, but you know what I mean. It's like a lot going on. Is that then the yin to, for example, the yang of the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz Ensemble?
Exactly, you nailed it as well. Mansour is the yin to the Anselais and the Black Boys.
I could have completed that sentence the moment you started it. Okay. But what is then the yin to Celestial Season?
Let me think, what projects are there? Maybe the early Bong-Ra, when let's say the late 90s, early 2000s, when I really started, let's say, into composing dub, dancehall, raga, breakcore, jungle, which was actually very intense and influenced by reggae, influenced by black culture. That is the yin to the Celestial Season, being metal, European music. So there's a contrast there, I think.
That is a very interesting point, because basically you are taking Celestial Season and Bong-Ra, which, especially the early Bong-Ra, it happened at the same time. Was that something that you now know, okay, that was my yin to my yang? Whereas at the beginning, when you did that, you didn't even notice that you were balancing yourself out?
I don't think I understood it in like 95, 96, 97. Yeah. But I did start catching on to it in the early 2000s, once, there were extremes in project. I think if you would have the period of Bong-Ra where I was going more into the very heavy dark breakcore, for example, releases like Vitus Blister, which are 240, 280 BPM, extreme nasty dissonant breakcore, with then the juxtaposition to the soft melodies of the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz. So there your yin and yang. Maybe or possibly that projects evolved and evolving together find their own yin and yangs at this time. So Bong-Ra, early Bong-Ra, let's say dancehall, raga, dub, jungle Bong-Ra was the yin and yang to the Celestial Season, where then the dissonant, extremely dark and nasty later Bong-Ra was then the yin and yang to Kilimanjaro.
But that is interesting, because first of all, we notice that for you, one side of a balance can be exchanged, because you have now used Bong-Ra in 3 different constellations as one part of a balancing. That means that if we take that seriously, then Bong-Ra, for your own inner well-being, might be, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it might be the most important project.
It's been there the longest. You could say that it's the kind of beacon in the, or let's say the sun in the revolving planets around it, where it's not a constant because it's been moving, that project, but it's been a constant as in, at least kind of the beacon, as in, the guiding way. Okay, we're moving somewhere. The projects, the planets are moving around, at least one entity, and that entity, although also metamorphizing over the years and decades, has kind of remained the constant, as in, for the other planets to evolve around it. Yeah. And probably because Bong-Ra has been, let me think if I'm not mistaken, I think so, yeah, is the project which has always been me alone. If you take Celestial or Mansour or Kilimanjaro or The Antilles in the Black Void or Lovecraft, work with other people. Although the Lovecraft, I do compose it alone, but like, for example, Colin on saxophone is a very important part to the sound of the project. Like, with
do you
Bong-Ra,
also compose his parts?
No. I give him, I can give him an indication of this or that, but actually the more we progressed, it's like, Colin, you know what to do now. And usually it turns out better because it's his skill, it's his craft. And the man knows his saxophone and he knows how to improvise. So yeah, it's don't get in the way with the chef when you're just doing the dishes. So yeah.
You're talking to somebody who learned in a 2-star restaurant.
Talking about restaurants, then, I often use the metaphor of cooking when it comes to the way I approach music. And that's often is when these many projects or this change in sound, why or how, explain this. So how I see most of the bands, most of the musicians stick to their, one band, one sound, and have a whole catalog where there's little variations, which then I see as a restaurant with a chef who has one main dish, but his whole career is to perfect that dish, and which I admire. You have a pasta chef who can make the best pasta, and it's very, one-sided in ingredients and taste, but I like to see myself as, the cook who likes to dabble around with spices and ingredients, fusion. And yeah, unfortunately, I make a lot of dishes, which are great in tasting, but I'm not that chef who makes that one good dish. Both are fine. Both are good. And luckily, they're both there.
And both can be awesome. I mean, like,
absolutely.
I've been to restaurants in, for example, London and in New York. I found a lot of restaurants in New York where they basically only serve like 1 or 2 things.
Yeah.
And those things are then done to perfection. I know that a lot of restaurants in Japan are that way. You have one thing on the menu and that's done to the T. I couldn't do that. Also not when I'm cooking. I couldn't do the same thing over and over again. I'm more like you. I would have to experiment. But both things are very good on their own term.
Absolutely.
Both things are wonderful.
Look at Iron Maiden. They stuck to,
yes,
one
look
thing.
At AC/DC.
AC/DC. And yeah, I mean, a lot of bands do like to, but there are a lot of others who play around and come with interesting new things. But yeah, fine, good. Thank God there are these both extremes again. So yeah.
Exactly. And I'm also glad that, for example, an institution like the Guide Michelin nowadays recognizes that. The Guide Michelin has now been giving away stars to a lot of restaurants in Asia who do something similar, who have like 3, 4, 5 dishes on the menu, and that's fine. Yeah. But coming back to you, because you are the cook who likes to experiment. When listening to Bong-Ra, we've already said it is a little bit more, or the new record is a little bit more organic than some of the older stuff. Can you, for our audience, maybe shortly explain how you wrote, composed, recorded the new material for Black Noise?
Yeah. So I usually start with Bong-Ra with percussion, with the beats. I make some tests to see what kind of sound, where do I want to go. So this was very glitchy, very industrial, very mechanical, but it still needed to have a bit of the metal, the band sounding drum. So it was finding the mix between the electronic drums, but still sounding a bit organic, going still nonetheless with a huge layer of glitchy source over it. So what I then usually do is I make an 8 or 16 bar drum loop, program it, do recordings with granular effects, with echoes, stutter edit. So find and chop up the beats. So once that's there, most of the time the programmed drums, the loop kind of generates a melody by itself because of pitching the drums and with these glitches. Then I grab the guitar and put the loop on, and then I just start playing first. And once it starts forming, I just press record, start playing until there's a moment where I'm like, okay, that's good. I get some ideas. Either I let it stop and sink in for a while, maybe have some pads or just some kind of synth keys to put down some bass chords, see where I'm going, and then get the guitar again. And then usually it kind of fleshes out for this album pretty quickly, because I think it was building up in me. Like I said, you already have the concept of the album and where you want to go. So I think the album was written and recorded 1 to 2 months maximum from
Wow.
scratch. Yeah. It was dying to get out there.
Okay.
And I hadn't worked on programming the breakcore glitchy drums for quite a while. So actually it worked to the advantage, because I'd thrown away a lot of the old samples I used, start again fresh. You still have the techniques in you, but you've learned a lot of new tools with other projects. So I think it kind of added a bit of a fresh approach to programming the drums as well.
Jason, there is something about you that we indirectly have hinted at. You are a very calm person. Is Bong-Ra also then, or also some of your other projects, is that then your way of releasing some of the more restless side of Jason Köhnen?
No. I have my restless side as well. I can get annoyed and ticked off with things as well. But no, not really. I don't know. It's definitely not something calculated to say, okay, there is this layer of aggression, or there's this energy that needs to be let out. No. Unless it's subconscious and I've not realized that it's there. So in any way, it's not a calculated planned thing that needs to be expressed in that way. So
before we come to the infamous quickfire round, there's one thing that I have to ask about the new album as well, and that is the title, Black Noise. I'm very sure it's in opposition to that term of white noise, but then again, what is black noise for you?
Yes, there are multiple meanings. Yes, it's as in the the dualities of the white noise having the black noise. So it's the opposed from what the meaning is of white noise, but predominantly it's a reference to a festival in Hungary, Fekete Zaj,
Oh,
which means black noise, and it's actually a kind of a thank you to the two organizers, Daniel and Balázs. And Daniel also works for the A38 boat, and Balázs, who is also the manager for Dicatafog. It's because the fact that I'm here living in Hungary, they really busted my balls to perform with Bong-Ra again, just do a one-off DJ set. And so, which I did, and that also partially sparked the energy to, reboost the project. And apart from, black noise being a great reference as an opposition to white noise, it was also predominantly a thank you to them for igniting that fire, which was that flame was growing, but this was the bit of petrol which got it boosted. So
that is very interesting that you mentioned that. If anybody wants to know a little bit more about the especially Budapest scene, one of the first things that we ever released here on the Veil of Sound back in 2021, my God, was a scene report on Budapest. So if you want to check that out, you will also get to hear something about the Fekete, and you will also get to hear something about, for example, Dürekert and the A13, incredible clubs and important clubs in Budapest and also in all of Hungary. So for all those who are interested in that, check that out in our archives. Jason, there is also something that I just saw when I looked at some of my notes. Like black noise, you've now explained it, but is it also for you interesting to work with titles that basically always need another component? Because let's be clear, we would not know what black is if we wouldn't know what white is. Is that once again the balance thing?
Yes, there's a lot of references to duality and to dual meanings to titles. So nothing is really what it seems. It is what it seems, but there is also always a hidden message. And that's something I picked up from a lot of teachings and the mystery teachings, where occultist books, the symbolism, where even if you take the Bible, so any how do you call it, impressive or important book or teaching in human history, not all, but a lot of them have these dual meanings to it. There is the layer, which if you read it from the surface, you'll read a story which is in front of your eyes, but if you have a deeper understanding of something, you'll see the letters disappear, and the symbolism will become clear, and there will be another message there, lying there waiting to be picked up or not, depending on how you read things.
It's very interesting when you explain that. And I was just listening to you talk, and I was looking at the record title again, and I noticed, okay, there is this other duality. Black needs white, noise needs another form of sound. And it all depends on where you stand. Yeah. That is highly intellectual in a very positive and simply put way. Thank you, Jason. Very, very well explained. I wish I could do that. So thanks for the insight into the record, into the way you wrote it, into the meaning behind stuff, also into your own personal voyage. But for a moment, you will have to stop this voyage, because everybody here at the Veil of Sound interviews has to go through the infamous quickfire round. You will always get two couples, like AC versus DC, Guns versus Roses, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola, a real politician versus an ape in the White House. You have to choose and then give a short explanation for your choice. Of course, I chose a lot of musical couples, and as you often proclaim your love for jungle music, I thought, that's too easy. I'll give you drum and bass. I'll give you LTJ Buchan versus Ronnie Size.
I have to choose one of them.
Yes, one of them.
Oh, Ronnie Size. No question.
Okay. I'm not sure whether I hit the spot with the next couple, but I'll try. One of the most impressive bands over the last 20 some years has been Amen-Ra from Kortrijk in Belgium. And they have also some offspring side projects. So I'll give you Chue, like Colin van Eckhout, versus Syndrome, Mathieu's dark ambient project.
I don't know both of them, so
I would have thought.
I'll choose both or neither, as you wish.
Okay. But no, that's fine. When it comes to experimentalism and also trying to work with sound, there is one New York band that I love, and that's Grails. I hope that you're familiar with them, because I'll give you Grails versus Stars of the Lid.
Grails.
Can you explain why?
I'm less known with Stars of the Lid. And I mean, there would be other ones which I probably wouldn't choose Grails, but having to choose from these two, I find it the more interesting one.
I first was thinking about giving you two Hungarian bands, but then I chose not to. I'll give you two also in some way avant-garde, but from another perspective on it. I'll give you Oiseau Tempête versus Set Fire to Flames.
What was the first one?
I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly. Oiseau Tempête from France. Oiseaux.
Oiseau Tempête.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oiseau.
Yeah.
Sorry, my
and
French teacher will excuse me. Set Fire to Flames.
I also don't know.
Both of them or one of them?
I don't know both of them.
Okay. I also thought about your two doom jazz / dark jazz projects. Which mountain would you rather climb? The Mount Fuji or Kilimanjaro?
Now that's a tough one.
I think Kilimanjaro is higher, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I never thought that question would be so hard to answer, because you're mixing a lot of different things than just the mountains. It would have to be Kilimanjaro.
But my question is only about the mountain.
Yes. I see your hidden layer underneath this question. Kilimanjaro it is.
You spoke about your love for Orwell and Huxley, so I'll give you two books by Orwell, because I am sorry, but I don't remember a second book by Huxley, apart from Brave New World. But Orwell, Animal Farm versus 1984.
Animal Farm.
Interesting choice. Why would you choose Animal Farm?
I think Animal Farm, when it comes to digging deeper into specific human psyche, psychology, let's say even though we're having, 1984 is not fiction anymore, it's coming reality, blah, blah, blah. I think that Animal Farm, personally for me, touches more realistic parts of human nature.
I understand that. Two classic, I don't want to say sci-fi music, but movies that talk about a certain version of the future. 2001 versus Clockwork Orange.
God damn, that's really tough.
I know. I'm also glad that I don't have to answer.
I think I'd go for 2001, and why it's so it's not based on the quality or the impact both films have had. It's because not long ago I found this incredibly good analysis of this English film commentator about 2001, where he dived into the theory of what the monolith was. And for maybe now in the times we're living, it would be quite obvious. Putting yourself in the time period of when the film was made, it's actually mind-blowing. So,
6 years ago.
Yeah, so that, and, obviously, yeah, Clockwork Orange, I find it very sad that the ultra-violence that is pictured and that is thematic in the film has kind of arrived to our world, in a different scenario, very confrontational. But yeah, having to choose, then going to the metaphysical part of 2001, then slightly 51% to 49.
Yeah. Fun fact, do you know why the computer is called HAL?
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't it the words IBM?
Yes.
Or moved one?
It's just moved one letter to the front.
Yes.
Okay. I've only found out about that like a year ago, and I heard about it. I had to rewatch the movie, and I was again flabbergasted. It's
so
such
if you didn't that theory that film critic or that film analyzer brought was so that the monolith turned around was to show so the television or the pictured screen or even the mobile phone is the monolith. So if you then look at the film again and kind of understand that that's what the whole thing is about, a warning, it's fantastic. So this guy knew way much more than he let on or didn't let on or whatever. Talk about an occultist. He was one of them.
Yeah, and it's also the way I think that there is a reason why he didn't make a lot of movies. Like, it's not like Scorsese who did like 30 movies or so, but
there is a lot of information about Eyes Wide Shut and, and his death just after the film, the re-editing of there's a lot of stuff there. What he was trying to point out, with these elitists and, these sex crime syndicates or human trafficking, this man was onto a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Which also in times of P. Diddy and Drake.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's there where these things are cyclical. They come and go into the psyche of the mainstream, but they have always been there. That's the thing, and people like Kubrick managed or tried to show it us in a way again with that second layer. You look at the film, you can see a nice film with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, but you go deeper and there's some weird shit going on there.
And of course it's a wonderful adaptation of a German novella.
Oh, really?
Schnitzler's Traumnovelle.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, I'll check that out.
Yeah, I don't know how good your German is. I mean, like, you're Dutch, so maybe you know a little bit of German?
I guess there's an English translation.
Yeah, of course there is.
Yeah. But my German's not good enough to read a novella, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, that's what a lot of Dutch people say. And when they talk Dutch, and I'm like, German, and I'm like, if I only knew half as much Dutch as you do German. But you've talking about music as also a way to get out. You've spoken about music as your religion. And of course, every religion needs its mantra. And I'll give you two bands from very, very different parts of our musical spectrum. But I know that both serve as mantras for certain people. I'll give you Om, O-M, versus Godflesh.
I can't choose. They're both. I knew you're going to say Om, and I thought, okay, he's going to say Om. I'm going to say, okay, that's done. It's going to be Om. But if you put Godflesh next to it, I'm not going to choose. This is okay.
But do you see what I mean? Like very different spectras, but
that's
in a
what
way,
that's what I'm pointing at. And I find, Pilgrimage, Om. Oh my goodness, it's the absolute masterpiece, and I've seen some live footage as well. And yeah, it's a light and dark mantra. It's organic and mechanic mantras, but they exist together perfectly as that yin and yang. If you would go to a Om Godflesh concert, you'd come out like a Buddhist monk, enlightened, floating, so yeah.
With the next and last couple, I'm very sure we would not go out as monks because our brains would be earth-shaken. But I'm interested in if you would choose one of them. I'll give you KK Null, the guy from Zinigeva and who does now a lot of avant-garde electronics, versus Merzbau.
I've heard stories about both because obviously Balázs Pandi, a good friend of mine, has performed with both of them. And I know both the music as well. I think I've even performed with KK Null once, if I'm not mistaken. Who would I choose for? I think I would go for Merzbau. This kind of, harsh noise, let's say, Japanese experimentalism, however you want to call it. It's not really my cup of tea, but I really do admire Merzbau's dedication, artistry, and innovativism, into his universe. That's saying no disrespect to KK Null, but I think Merzbau has, definitely, yes, everyone knows the Merzbau, and if there are memes about your music, then you've really gotten somewhere. So
that's true. That is definitely true. Would you also agree to his definition of noise? Because I've like 10 years ago, I saw his definition of noise, where he says, if noise is music that makes you uncomfortable, then pop music is noise to me.
Yeah, he's got a point. Absolutely. Yeah, I can live with that one.
Yeah. I'm very happy that I can say that even with Merzbau's definition, Bong-Ra or The Answer Lies in the Black Void or the Kilimanjaro Darkjazz or whichever of your projects, none of them is noise to me. All of them is relevant. And I'm very, very happy to have had you on the show. Jason, thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. It was a great interview. Really enjoyed it. And catch up soon, man. Take care. Have a good evening.
Take care. Thank you.
All
You
right.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.